And a low frickin' ah. I know this one was bad, man. They come out in a second. They look like they were going to do something. I got to bring him in. I got to know what he's want to say. At first, I got to bring in my buddy Lance. Lance from the Drop. How you doing, bud?
Just fine. How are you? Hey, Jeremy.
Hey, Lance. Before we get going, I got a buddy of yours to bring on, and he has graciously decided. I've got Terry Yake of the Blues coming back on. Terry, welcome. This is Lance from the Drop Podcast. I think you guys may have talked before.
I met him a long time ago through the I can't even think of their name now. The father and son that does the Toast Dispatch.
Oh, okay.
Account on Twitter. It's been a long time ago. It's been a while back.
Nick Pavlos.
Yeah, but it's been a while.
Yeah, so someone just threw up unpopular opinion, but would trading Tarasenko make sense at this point?
No,
I don't think so. Yeah,
no.
It's a rough streak, but it doesn't mean anything. LA's had our number, and they came out and they said it. You had the day off. You couldn't do nothing because of COVID. You're either going to come out like gangbusters or you're going to lay an egg.
Well,
they laid an egg.
Here's the thing, guy. Tarasenko's just come off an injury. His timing's going to be off. He's playing with different players. Some of them he's never played with before, such as Hoffman. And if they did, let's say, try to trade him, what are they going to get for him? Yeah. Nobody's going to give him anything for him because he's coming off the injury. Now, if it was a year from now and he'd scored 35, 40 goals and they thought, we're not going to be able to re-sign him, then they might be able to get something out of him. But let's see what he can do. It takes your timing. It takes a while when you're out that long. I mean, because you've seen it, Terry. I mean, you've got a preseason and you play like a few games in the preseason. You play some inter squad games. And when you get into the regular season, your timing still is not there. So Vlad's even farther behind than that.
Yeah, he's definitely going to be behind. And he's barely played any games over the last 2 years. So he's got a couple of years of hockey to catch up on just to get up to speed. So it's clearly, to me, it's too early to give up on this group. I mean, we didn't give up in a couple of years ago when they were in last place on January 3rd, and there's no reason to say they're going to do that now. This situation's even more extreme because you're playing with a third of an American Hockey League lineup. It's the San Antonio Blues right now, so it's not really anything you can sneer at. These guys are actually playing pretty well. They're doing their best to keep them in hockey games. They need some critical goals, but it's tough when you're counting on the top 4 or 5 guys, not even top 6 or 9 right now, to provide all your offense. We're not getting the production from the back end that we did because it's not as dynamic as it was before, and you're counting a lot of minutes for Falk and Krug and Dunn and these guys, and those are your offensive guys. And without Parayko, you just don't have enough guys to jump in from the back end. So it's got to be done by O'Reilly, Perron, and a sharp Tarasenko, and Shen, who's now not playing with shorts. So it's a lot to ask right now, and the guys are feeling it. But I'm still confident that this is clearly a top 4 team, and they'll end up in a playoff spot before the year's over.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I'm with you, too. I think they are, too. And I think by the time that they get – and they're getting healthy, and that's the big thing, right? You have Thomas coming back. You have Barbashev coming back shortly. Schwartz is just about ready to come back. I've been told that Parayko is starting to get on the ice. I don't know if that's fact or not, but you could be seeing him, or even hold them out till the playoffs if need be, and then you don't have to worry about the salary cap. So it all depends there. I got to ask Jared. I got to ask the Fox, because you've been with us for you've been in my ear the last couple. What do you think of today's show, and what do you think of our guest? Or you got any questions for our guest?
I think today's show has gone great. And Terry, I do have a quick question. I have made it very well known that I am a Penguins fan. I bleed black and yellow. You were a Capitals player back when the Pens and the Caps first started their playoff rivalry. I'm curious, how was it on the ice? Was it as tense as it seemed on TV, or was it worse?
Well, I think that rivalry is one of the best in the game, but I think it started long before I was in Washington. I was there in 2001, and we actually met the Penguins in the first round, and Yager and crew took us down, despite the fact that our team in Washington was first overall in the National Hockey League. No, actually, we were second overall, but we had the most wins in the second half of the season. The Blues were first overall that year.
Mhm.
So we lost in the first round to the Penguins. That was a disappointing one because it looked like a team with Adam Oates and Peter Bondra, Gonchar on the back end, and Olaf Kolzig minding the nets. It was going to be a really good one. But that team was just so dynamic with players like Yager up front that they were hard to beat. I would argue that rivalry started back probably in the Mario days, maybe in the early 90s when he was really good because you were going against some pretty good Capital teams then. Pittsburgh might have had the edge early on, and I don't know what the season series at, but that's one of the better ones in the National Hockey League, and it's still going on strong today because of course,
Ovi and Crosby
and Ovechkin, exactly.
Yeah.
Wow.
I had to ask you because, being that you were a Caps player, it's just, I remember watching Bondra and Gonchar when he was in a Caps jersey, ruining Penguins' dreams every freaking time he was on the point. So it was like, I had to ask. I appreciate it.
Let me ask you something, Terry. So when you're doing this with us and you're talking to guys, regular guys, we're not professional media or that, and you hear some of the, I guess, fangirling that we have. Do you enjoy it? Do you not like it? How do you feel about some of that?
No, it's actually always a lot of fun. You were out of the game for a little while. It's always fun to go back and reminisce about old stories, tell stories that have happened in the past, and hear what the everyday hockey fan wants to talk about. Because when you talk to the media, a lot of times you get the generic question, you get the politically safe question, you get the one that forces you to give the politically correct answer. Yeah, they might try to sometimes ask you something that's going to be off the record. And because, I've worked for an NHL team, I want to work for an NHL team again someday, maybe, we got to give the politically correct answer. A lot of those guys are my friends out there. And when you ask me who is the most hated guy out there, at this point, I can't even really come up with a name because I don't look at them that way. I had drinks and sat down to dinner with guys who broke my ribs and elbowed me in the head. So it's hard to, it's hard to say that you hated them. You maybe did at the time, but it all goes away after you retire, and we all become one as part of a retired NHL player and alumni.
Oh, so well, thank you. So now I don't feel so bad. Lance, what do you got for us, bud?
Oh, I don't really have a lot. I mean, I think with this game, there were a few times where we've seen some positive things. I thought, considering Bozak, this was basically his first game back, I think he looked pretty good, considering it's his first game back. I'm sure he's going to have some growing pains there getting back, but overall, I thought that they played bad. But it's like I always say, Guy, you got all these people that are blaming the players, people blaming Berube. A coach puts a system in, and whether you have injuries or not, you're the next man up. And, since I played for a long time, from the age of 6 till I was 42, until I had my stroke and it screwed my balance up and I can't play goalie anymore and my eyesight screwed up. But coaches put you in a position to make plays and to win. And your coach, even if you come up from the AHL, like Terry was saying, you've got to do your job. You've got to do your job. You may not be as good as that guy you're taking its place for, but if you do your job and you work at it 100% for that game you're in there, or 2 or 3 games you're in there, at least you're going to have a positive result. I've always been the type of guy that whether I'm playing, and the guys in front of me are playing, if the guys in front of me are giving an effort, if you lose, you'll lose. If the guys in front of you aren't giving an effort, then it's a little different story. But I think a lot of these guys that have come up, including Joshua, he looks really, really good for a young kid. He's a little lanky. I'd like to see him gain a little bit weight. But I think they've got some good young players, and I'm sure Terry will agree that this experience is only going to help them. The more games you can get in the NHL, because, Terry knows it. everybody says, well, the AHL is a pro league. These guys should come up here and be good. It's a different game. It's faster. And not all the guys down there are NHL caliber. You come up to the NHL, and every guy in the NHL is normally NHL caliber, like with goalies. The difference between an NHL goalie and an AHL goalie and a confident goalie in the NHL is a goalie that's got his mental game. You can have all the tools in the world, but if you don't have your mental game straight, you're not going to be a good NHL goalie.
Oh, I kind of agree with that. And this brings up, you brought up a good point. So in the last game after it, Coach Berube went off on the team.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't say names, but not doing their job. We got to get guys back because these guys aren't doing their job. Do your job. Do your job. Terry, I'm asking you from a player standpoint, when you hear your coach say that, what's going through your mind? Are you taking a self-interest, or are you looking at other guys? What is going on in the locker room when the coach says that publicly?
Well, the first is concern. Obviously, you got to be concerned about that he's upset and that you're going to have to watch for your own ice time and make sure that you do your job. So, obviously that's going to give you a little bit more incentive to go out and do a better job the next period, the next shift, the next game. But with regards to, where the Blues are at right now and, tonight's game, they started flat tonight. They weren't skating. LA was the faster team for the first part of the game. They outshot them. They pretty much earned those first few goals. Now, I thought the Blues bounced back very well, but the lack of depth and the inability to keep the pressure on. Let's compare this team to the team that won the Stanley Cup a couple of years ago. It was four lines: Sundqvist, Barbashev. Those players were on the fourth line. They were good young players who got their feet wet with the Blues over the course of a year or two. And by the time they got to the Stanley Cup Finals, they were the fourth line players that were able to keep the pressure on. This is what the Blues made the Blues so successful. Craig Berube's system hasn't changed. It hasn't gotten worse. It's been copied around the National Hockey League. There are more and more teams doing what the Blues did, playing what we would call Blues hockey. So it makes it difficult because other teams are learning from that. But you're right in a sense that you can't just throw American Hockey League players in on the third and fourth line, fifth and sixth pairing of defensemen, and ask them to go out and perform as well as Barbashev and Sundqvist did in the Stanley Cup playoffs a few years ago. It's just not. They're just not physically and or mentally able to do that already yet. They're probably good enough to play in the National Hockey League. It's just really difficult. And in fairness to them, it's difficult to do it when you've got 6 or 7 of them in the lineup. And that's the situation the Blues are under right now with so many key injuries. You're out, you're losing, even Gunnarsson and, losing actually Petro in the summer, but losing Gunnarsson right now, another depth defenseman. And then you got Schwartz, Tarasenko and Bozak are still a little rusty. You got Thomas out, you got Barbashev out. There's a lot of guys that are putting a little bit of a hole in this lineup. And as guys starting to come back, I think you'll find the Blues start to win 3 or 4 in a row before they lose one, and that'll get them back into a good position for the playoffs.
Yeah, and Terry, you make a great point, and a lot of people don't realize it, is that you hear people say, well, how come O'Reilly doesn't get in people's faces? Why doesn't he make other guys, more accountable? Why don't he do this? You've got to be responsible for yourself. Number one, you're part of the team. You know what you're supposed to do. You can't do what that other guy's supposed to do. You can only do what you can do. And, you can have captains are different. Some captains, like I spoke to Grant Fuhr several times, and Grant will tell you that Messier was a leader in the locker room. Gretzky was a leader in the locker room, but Gretzky's style of leading was more by example than to really calling people out. Messier was the one that would tend to call people out and be rougher on them. You can't expect guys to do that with everybody, and you've got to go in and just be responsible for yourself. And, like Terry said, we've got to get all these players back. They got to get cohesive, because the more you play on a line, the more you know where the other guy is going to be. There's very few times where a guy like Adam Oates can come in and play with Brett Hall, and it seems like just instantly, Terry, Oates knows where Hall is going to be. That doesn't happen very often. It takes time to build those lines, and when you break them up and try to bring them back together, it takes time to get that timing back together.
Yeah, certainly. That's definitely the case. And, it's gonna be nice when some players get back and there's still gonna be work to do. I wouldn't even be surprised if the Blues fall out of position for a little while, but they'll find a way to get back in there before the year's over. And this team's too talented unless the injuries continue to mount up. And as guys come back, they lose other players, and that would be trouble. Anybody that's saying Ryan O'Reilly's not doing their job, I don't think is in the locker room. I'm not in the locker room, and I can guarantee you Ryan O'Reilly's doing everything he can to help this team win. I watch him every night. He still plays with his heart on his sleeve. He leaves everything on the ice, and I guarantee you he's not leaving anything unsaid in the locker room if it needs to be said.
Yep.
Oh, I'm probably dead on with that. And you hear it in his post games, right? It's the amount that he takes on. I need to be better. We need to be better. I need to be better. We need to do this. I need to do this. They've got that commercial out that says there's no we, or there's no I in team, but he says, I need to be better, to put it on his shoulders so everyone knows that he's not thinking that he's the greatest player in the world, or just because he's the captain, he's doing it all. I love that. And I got one question for you, Terry, kind of off subject a little bit. So arguably, you're probably, up until Pietrangelo, one of the biggest names to wear the number 27. When you saw your number raising the cup, what went through your mind?
Well, I honestly kind of wished I had the opportunity, but I was so excited for the organization, the club, the city. I mean, I know that there's been a lot of heartache, probably starting in the first couple of years when they went to the Stanley Cup Finals multiple times and couldn't get the job done against obviously very, very veteran teams with Montreal and Boston, to the early and mid 90s when it looked like they had the team that could do the job with Brett Hull and Al McInnes here, and then a couple of key trades kind of just derailed those opportunities, to the late 90s when we were a top 3 or 4 team, the years I was here, with the two greatest defensemen to probably ever don a Blues jersey, in McInnes and Pronger. You got Grant Fuhr in net, and you had a team that was right at the top of the league, and we just happened to have to meet Detroit, Colorado, and Dallas in the second round, and they all went on to win the Stanley Cups those years. So really difficult thing to swallow, but to see them finally lift it, I didn't really look at it as my number was lifting it. I was looking at it as there was a Blues jersey lifting it, and that's really what mattered the most.
Yeah, and one thing that I love, and I talk to a lot of NHL players around the league, and most of them have a lot of nice things to say about St. Louis and fans and stuff. And I know every city thinks they have the best fans, and every city thinks guys want to play there. But I've talked to several guys who never played in St. Louis that have said, I wish I could have played there, for a little bit, because every guy I talked to on the Blues team, said it was a great city, and people were just so nice there. And I don't think that can be overstated. I don't think it really can. And, I personally think that Binnington probably could have got a little more money outside of St. Louis if he kept playing, like he was, because there's several games this year, even though the Blues lost, if it wasn't for Binnington, it could have been 3-4 to nothing in the first period. Yeah. And I think he honestly took less at $6 million a year, and people don't believe me. I think he could have got 6.5 to 7 somewhere else. I don't know if it would have been for 6 years, maybe 5 years. But I think it just goes to show he wanted to get the contract done. And players like playing in St. Louis. I mean, Terry can tell you that. I mean, he liked playing here. I'm sure when he went to other teams, he liked playing in Washington and everything. But I'm sure St. Louis, especially since he's still around here, it'll always hold a special place in his heart.
Well, there's also a reason why there's over 50 alumni living in the city now that never grew up there and played there outside of Cam Jansen. Everybody else grew up somewhere else in North America and decided to make St. Louis their homes. And that's it's not just a credit to the organization and everything that went on behind the scenes and the things that happened in the locker room and on the ice. It's mostly a credit to the fans and the people of the city.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, here's actually a good question, and I've wondered this myself. I'll ask Terry this, if maybe, I don't know if you know or not, but why do you think the team didn't extend an offer to Maroon and let him go to another team for even less money than what he was being paid here?
Well, I think there was an opportunity to bring in more kids. I mean, you've got to sometimes look at the value of youth and what it can bring to the table. If you've got a young guy who's in his early 20s and has 10 to 15-year potential upside that makes the same or less amount of money, at this point, you're looking at a contract that you can keep at bay for 3 or 4 more years, maybe 6, as many as 6 if it's a young kid.
Mhm.
If you're going to get the similar or very same kind of play, you're hoping that it's not going to be just as good, but eventually it's going to be better. And we have this guy at a better cap number. So, for the Blues, it was part decision, or part business decision. Obviously everybody would have loved to seen Maroon stick around in St. Louis. As far as the personal aspect and the story aspect, I think it's a great Cinderella story, him coming back there and winning the cup with the Blues. But obviously, I think it worked out for both teams. The Blues have got some good young players that they're given an opportunity to get in the lineup, and Maroon got an opportunity to go to another great hockey team and help them go to another Stanley Cup. So I think it worked out well for everyone. And in that situation, Doug Armstrong's is making a solid business decision with the youth of a player.
Oh, and you know what? That's the best explanation I've ever heard. And people are loving it because it makes sense to them now when they hear it that way. When you see it from a fan's perspective, you don't completely understand what's going on. Terry, one of the things that I think, and you guys just brought up, I actually think, and you played in so many different cities, you only played in St. Louis for 3 years, yet for a period, you decided to make St. Louis your home. And I think that outside of Canada, more former players live in St. Louis than any other American city. Why? What is bringing, and I'll give one example, a guy that never played for St. Louis, decided to make St. Louis his home, and his business place is Ollie and Wah, the Wah Sports Group.
Yep.
What about our city is so attractive to you guys?
Well, first of all, it's a great hockey city, and you have an opportunity because of our alumni to be part of something else that is still hockey related. We've got an amazing suite, thanks to the Blues, with 50 plus tickets so the guys can come and watch hockey games. Secondly, the fans. The fans are some of the best in the National Hockey League in respect to they know who you are. They love to watch you play. They're very respectful when they come up to you and tell you things like, and this is the most respectful thing you can do to a retired player, when you come up and say to them, I really enjoyed your game, or watching you play last night, or watching you play 10 years ago, but then they let you go on with your daily life. It's something to be in the spotlight when you're playing, but I don't think anybody wants to be hounded and harassed, years and years after they've retired. And the city of St. Louis, I found the people very, very fun, respectful. They recognize who you are, but they let you go on and live your life and just make you feel like you're important, but not make you feel like you're going to be harassed every time you go somewhere. I tell a story all the time about sitting in the California Pizza Kitchen at the mall in Brentwood. And we came in there in training camp. Mark McGuire was on his record-setting home run pace, and he was sitting in the California Pizza Kitchen by himself, about to break a major league record, eating lunch, and not a single person bothered him for about an hour. And the 3 or 4 of us that came to lunch in there sat at a different table. We walked over and shook his hands because he'd come to our locker room many times. Brett Hall, Chris Pronger, Kelly Chase, those guys had brought him into the locker room, so we knew who he was. And we said hi, talked to him for 20 seconds, and we walked out and let him be on his way. The guy was able to sit and have lunch by himself and not be bothered. That's the respect of the St. Louis fans. You would never be able to do that if you lived in New York, if you were a Dodger in LA, or if you were a Maple Leaf or a Canadian in Toronto or Montreal. So those are the kinds of things I think really attract people to the city of St. Louis, and it really comes back to the fans.
Yeah, and another thing is, Terry, I traveled a lot in Canada playing a lot of hockey, and also in a previous business that I had for a tech company, and several of the guys told me up there that the reason that they think that St. Louis is such a big part of former NHL players' lives, and that they live there now, is a lot of the towns that they grew up in, like Calgary and Winnipeg and Ottawa, that they're they're big cities, but it's not like a big city. Like St. Louis is a big city, but it's not like Chicago or New York or LA or Atlanta. The people are just different. They're more down to earth. Like you said, they're not going to come up and bug you for an autograph. And, when you're sitting down to eat with your family, they're not going to just sit there and stand by you and make you feel uncomfortable. They're going to walk up and say, like you said, hey, I enjoyed your game 10 years ago. I remember going to the game and watching you play. But I think a lot of that, like you said, has to do with I think the people of St. Louis remind a lot of Canadian-born hockey players of some of the cities up in Canada. People are just very down to earth and very generous and very kind.
Yes, absolutely. And that's, I think, the way that if everybody gets that message, that's the way I think most players would enjoy to be treated. We still we love to be recognized. It's always a feather in your cap, but, we also have lives, and almost everybody goes on with a family and a different life and another second business, and we have things to do as well. So you don't want to be gloated over, or you don't want to be followed all over town. It's a nice city for 9 months a year. There's a month or so that's too hot. There's a couple of months we get a little bit of winter, but the rest of the time the weather's great. So you can't beat that as well. You got great golf courses, and you have everything else you need. You got some baseball, you got major sports, and you have it is a little bit more like a small town with a big city feel.
Yeah, I always tell people whenever they complain about St. Louis weather, here's what I'll do. I'll take you in February, the 1st of March, up to Grand Prairie or up to Fort McMurray, and then we'll see if you really hate the St. Louis weather. It's bad, but it's nowhere near as bad as some of them northern Canadian towns. I spent about a month in Fort McMurray, and there's not a ton of stuff to do, and it was people were nice, but it was boring. And I spent a couple of weeks in Grand Prairie, and one of the funniest things ever, we were there during the time of the year when the sun didn't go down to about 2 a.m, I think, and it was only down for about 5-10 minutes, and then it started coming up again. We sat down to eat dinner about 12:30, and it was just the strangest thing in the world. But these people are still going on with their lives every day. And all of them told me, oh, it's great when the sun's up 23 and a half hours out of the day, but it really sucks when it's dark for 23 and a half hours a day.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, hey, Lance, you and Terry are both getting all kinds of great comments in the group, and I appreciate that. My show, and they love you more than me. Got to be doing something right.
I don't know about that.
Terry, you keep bringing up a lot of things, and you brought up something about the 99 playoffs against Dallas. That was the year that Brett Hull went to Dallas. What was it like for you guys to play? Because you played with the guy, and he was, even then, he was declining, but he was still a name. He was still a guy that could score goals. What was it like going from him being on your team playing against him, especially in a playoff series?
Well, it's a nightmare. First of all, I mean, first and foremost, you have to know that you've got to respect the guy because of his ability. And, you had some great players to play with in St. Louis with Pierre Turgeon and Scott Young or Pavel Dimitra or whoever. But he didn't lack for great players in Dallas either, with Mike Modano and Lettinen and Nieuwendyk. So you knew he was still going to get his chances. And if he got his chances, he was going to get his goals. It was just, can we keep him at bay and give ourselves a chance to win? So he was obviously a key cog in that hockey team, bringing a little bit of offensive punch to that club. It was still led by Nieuwendyk and Modano as a couple of their top players, but they had a brutal defense also, and a brutal goaltender with Belfour and net. So it was hard to get, it's hard to get past that offense, and it was hard to get past that defense. And that's the kind of teams that were built to win Stanley Cups. I think our team was built very similar, and unfortunately we lost in double overtime in Game 6. And if we'd have been able to take that series to Game 7, you never know. It's another coin toss, and we get through them. Maybe we go on to win the Stanley Cup as they did. So it was a heartbreaker watching Mike Modano score on the wraparound and in overtime to end that series. But it's been took 20 more years before the Blues probably had that good a chance again to hoist a cup and go further along in the playoffs.
Hey Terry, I want to ask you one thing. I got to sit down and be Grant Fuhr's special guest at his premiere of his movie Making Coco here in St. Louis in October of 2019, I believe it was. And Brett Hull was there, and Pronger was there, and Panger was there. And I got to hear a lot of stories from Brett Hall. Most of them I can't say on YouTube, probably. A few of them I could, but they weren't the best ones. Out from and I talked to Grant about it. And Grant's always got some great stories about Brett and about Chris and everybody, and a few about Jamie Rivers too. And Jamie's told me a bunch of stories about Al McGinnis and how he would treat him when he was a rookie and everything. And what is your favorite story about Brett Hall that you can tell us? Because I'm sure there's got to be one, because as much as he was telling stories and chirping and going on that night, I'm sure that you've got to have a pretty good Brett Hall story that's somewhat clean that you can tell us.
No, because you qualified it by saying somewhat clean. So actually, no, I don't.
No, you know what? I'm breaking the rule. For a Brett Hall story, you can go as R-rated as you want. Keep the X out. So you're open as R-rated as you want.
Oh, no. You opened the floodgates. Here we go.
You're asking me to commit media suicide right now. I don't think that's something that should be done.
No, what I'm asking you to do is get Brett so mad that he'll finally come on my show.
Oh, really?
Oh,
I mean, to do that, you'd probably have to get a hold of, maybe his wife or something like that, and tell her to tell him he can't play golf, and then you get him mad.
Oh yeah.
Oh, you know what?
Yeah.
I have gotten a hold of her, and she said if you want to talk to him, you got to go through the team.
Yeah, he was
been trying.
he was talking about playing golf. How much he was missing it, and he was going to have to get out of town to play because it was just starting to get a little chilly. And I tell you what, I've met a lot of hockey players like yourself, Terry, and you're all great guys. But the one word I can use to describe Brett Hall is character. He's a character.
Well, he sure wasn't afraid to speak his mind. And
No.
when he got a microphone in front of him, he told it often the way it was, and often that rubbed people the wrong way. But fortunately for him, he was going to score 741 goals. He was going to end up in the Hall of Fame, and he was powerful enough that he was able to do that. So I think it was a real I'd call it an enlightening time in the 90s, because I think some of his comments were probably taken to heart.
Yeah.
They're things that you think, but you never want to say. And when he says them, people start listening. And then maybe a Gary Bettman looks and goes, is he really telling the truth that this game is boring? Well, yeah, in some cases it was boring when you're allowed to hook and hold and pitchfork and lasso everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And guess what? Those words, never spoken by anybody else, probably got echoed and behind closed doors got told. And lo and behold, here we go, 2004, there's a lockout and those rules get changed. And all of a sudden we have the game we have today, which Brett Hall would have been absolutely dynamite in. Can you imagine if you didn't have the ability to put your biggest guy and put a lasso on him, how dangerous a player like that would have been in today's game? So a lot of fun to think about how the game would have been different in the 90s with Gretzky and Lemieux and Hall and players like that if there weren't some of the restrictions that it put on them.
Terry, you just basically spoke what I've said for a long time, and a lot of new fans and fans that haven't been around the game a long time who have never played the game will tell me that Brett Hall, Wayne Gretzky, Mario Lemieux couldn't play in today's game. And I will tell you this right now, from playing the game and going to almost every Blues game as a kid and as a teenager, Brett Hall got cross-checked in the back every time he got close to a player in front of the net. 4, 5, 6 times it was never called. He was hooked. He was held. He was interfered with. Gretzky was the same way. Gretzky wasn't a big guy. Gretzky was skinny, especially when he first came into the league. But a lot of people got to understand, you can look at different eras and guys are good for that era, but there are some of those guys that are good across any era. Any era at all. People say, well, guys like Terry Sawchuk couldn't be a goalie in today's game. Well, I think Terry Sawchuk would be a pretty good goalie in today's game. People say Grant Fuhr couldn't be a goalie in today's game. And I always bring up the point that, hey, listen, when I played as a teenager in the early 80s and Grant played as a professional in the early 80s, my goalie pads weighed about 30 pounds. By the end of the game, my leg pads had soaked up a pound or two of the melted ice, and they weighed about 32, 33 pounds. These goalies today have very light equipment. So I've always wanted to be the type of person to say, okay, let's take these great 80s goalies, 70s goalies like Ken Dryden, so on and so forth, and let's put them in pads for today and put the goalies from today in pads from back then, and then we'll see how they do. I think those guys back then would be very good in today's game.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure who those people are, but they obviously don't know what they're talking about because clearly, I think Connor McDavid's a wonderful player. Nathan McKinnon's a wonderful player. Every time they're on, I turn the TV on to watch them. But Wayne Gretzky would still lead the league in scoring. Mario would still lead the league in scoring, and they would still dominate the game today. No question. You can't tell me they're not fast enough. They weren't fast enough. You have to watch the game. Watch the 87 Canada Cup, the first 10 minutes of the game. It's about as fast a hockey as you've ever seen in your life. And there's 5 hooking penalties every 10 seconds.
I
changed the rules.
Yeah, about 3 or 4 months ago, these younger people kept putting out, that guys were slow. Well, I had 2 videos of Pavel Bure skating down the side, and this guy goes back. He goes, "Oh, I didn't think people back then were that fast." They go, "Yeah, they were fast, just like they are today."
Well, hey guys, I hate to do this. Unfortunately, family life calls, and I've got to end the show. Terry, Lance, this has been a great time. Terry, maybe down the road a little bit, you'll come back with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Whatever you guys need.
Oh, Terry, thank you so much.
Thank you, Terry.
And I'll keep texting you. Maybe we can get me some more good interviews, or you can get your buddy Brett Hull to finally do an interview with me. So, hey, guys, this is Guy, the Hawaii Blues fan, saying aloha mahalo. And you got to know today, I am bleeding blue with you. This has been a ton of fun, and I can't wait to see you all on Friday's show as we take on the Sharks. Aloha!